Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood in the hangar bay of the UES Valiant, staring at the sleek combat spacecraft that bore an ancient name from Earth's military history, the Apache. The ship gleamed under the artificial lighting, its angular frame designed for atmospheric combat on hostile worlds. Sarah had dreamed of flying one since she first joined the United Earth Space Corps 5 years ago. The problem was simple and frustrating. Nobody would let her fly it. Around her, the hangar buzzed with activity. Mechanics worked on landing gear. Supply crews loaded ammunition into the weapons bays. Pilots strutted past in their flight suits, heading to briefing rooms or cockpits. Sarah wore the same uniform as those pilots, had completed the same training, scored higher than most of them on the simulators. But when assignment day came, she received orders for logistics coordination instead of a cockpit. The official reason changed depending on who she asked. Captain Morrison said her talents were better suited for strategic planning. Commander Hayes mentioned that the Apache program had specific physical requirements she didn't quite meet. Lieutenant Kowalski just shrugged and said the slots were full. Sarah knew the real reason, though nobody would say it directly. She was human, yes, but she was also female, standing at 5'3", with a slight build that made the male officers exchange glances when she walked into a room. The United Earth Space Corps prided itself on equality. The recruitment posters showed humans of every background standing together against alien threats. The reality aboard military vessels proved more complicated. Old prejudices from Earth had followed humanity into space, wrapped in new excuses and justified with regulations that seemed reasonable on the surface. Sarah had filed 3 formal requests for transfer to combat pilot training. Each one disappeared into the bureaucratic void, answered weeks later with polite rejections. She considered going over her superior officers' heads, but that would mark her as a troublemaker. In the military, especially in space where your life depended on your crew, being labeled difficult could end a career faster than any official reprimand. The Apache before her represented everything she wanted. The spacecraft combined human innovation with captured alien technology, creating something faster and more maneuverable than anything else in the fleet. It could fight in the vacuum of space, dive through planetary atmospheres, and operate in conditions that would tear apart lesser vessels. The pilots who flew them became legends. Sarah wanted that chance, that opportunity to prove herself where it mattered most. She reached out and touched the Apache's hull. The metal felt cold even through her glove. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to find Colonel Marcus Vance, the Air Wing commander, walking toward her with 2 other officers. The colonel was a broad-shouldered man with gray hair and a face that seemed permanently fixed in a scowl. He had 40 years of military service, 15 of those commanding combat operations against the Kreth Collective, humanity's primary adversary in this sector of space. Colonel Vance stopped a few feet away, his eyes moving from Sarah to the Apache and back again. The other officers, both men she didn't recognize, stood slightly behind him with their arms crossed. "Lieutenant Chen," the colonel said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You seem to spend a lot of time in this hangar." Sarah straightened to attention. "Sir, I'm fascinated by the Apache program. I've studied every technical manual, reviewed combat footage from the Rigel campaign, and logged over 300 hours in the simulators." The colonel's expression didn't change. "The simulators aren't the same as real combat, Lieutenant. The Apache is a demanding aircraft. It requires specific skills, specific instincts. Not everyone is cut out for it." Sarah felt her jaw tighten but kept her voice level. "With respect, sir, my simulator scores are in the top 5%. I've demonstrated those skills and instincts repeatedly." One of the officers behind the colonel snorted softly. The sound made Sarah's blood boil, but she kept her face neutral. Colonel Vance studied her for a long moment. "Lieutenant, you have a promising career ahead of you in logistics. You're good at planning, at seeing the big picture. Why waste that talent trying to force yourself into a role that might not be the right fit?" The words were diplomatic, but Sarah heard the message underneath. She wasn't what they wanted in an Apache cockpit. She didn't fit their image of what a combat pilot should be. Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the hangar. Red emergency lights flashed along the walls. Sarah's communication device crackled to life with the executive officer's voice. "All hands to battle stations. Kreth attack force detected entering the system. Multiple capital ships confirmed." "This is not a drill." The hangar exploded into organized chaos. Pilots sprinted toward their aircraft. Mechanics abandoned their tools and rushed to remove safety locks and prep ships for immediate launch. The two officers with Colonel Vance ran off without waiting for dismissal. Colonel Vance grabbed Sarah's shoulder. "Get to your station, Lieutenant. We need logistics working at full capacity." Sarah watched him stride away toward his command post. Around her, Apache pilots climbed into their cockpits. Engines began their startup sequences, filling the hangar with a deep thrumming sound. These pilots would fly into battle, would engage the enemy, would write another chapter in humanity's ongoing struggle for survival among the stars. She would be in an office, coordinating supply routes and ammunition counts. Sarah clenched her fists, then forced herself to relax. She turned away from the Apache and headed toward the logistics center, weaving through running crew members and moving equipment. The ship shuddered slightly as it changed course, the captain positioning the Valiant for combat. Today, she would do her job. She would coordinate and plan and support. But Sarah Chen had not given up. She had an idea, something she'd been working on for months in her limited free time. The military might not let her fly the Apache through official channels, but there were other ways to prove her worth. If her idea worked, they wouldn't be able to ignore her anymore. If it worked, even Colonel Vance would have to listen. The battle raged for 6 hours. Sarah sat in the logistics command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing ammunition expenditure, fuel consumption, and damage reports. The Kreth had arrived with 3 heavy cruisers and 24 fighters, a significant force that caught the human fleet partially unprepared. The UES Valiant and her sister ships fought desperately to hold the line while civilian transports evacuated from the nearby mining colony. Through the tactical display, Sarah watched the Apache squadron engage Kreth fighters near the 4th planet. The enemy craft were organic-looking things, grown rather than built, with weapons that fired superheated plasma. Human ships relied on railguns and missiles, technology that seemed primitive compared to the biological warfare of the Kreth. But humanity made up for technological disadvantages with tactics and determination. Commander Willis, the logistics chief, barked orders from the center of the room. "Chen, I need ammunition projections for the next 2 hours. The Apaches are burning through their loads faster than anticipated." Sarah's fingers flew across her console, pulling data from multiple sources. The Apaches carried 72 missiles each, and at current engagement rates, they would run dry in 40 minutes. She calculated resupply times, factored in the distances between ships and the ongoing combat, and provided her projection. "Sir, at current expenditure rates, we'll need to rotate the Apaches back for rearm in 38 minutes. I recommend pulling Alpha and Bravo flights in sequence, keeping Charlie flight on station for coverage." Willis nodded approvingly. "Send that to the Colonel. Good work, Chen." Sarah transmitted her recommendation through official channels and returned her attention to the broader logistics picture. Watching battles from this perspective gave her a unique view that most combat pilots never saw. She could see the patterns, the flow of resources, the weak points in both human and alien formations. Her mind constantly analyzed angles of attack, optimal engagement ranges, and tactical opportunities. On the main display, she watched an Apache pilot make a mistake. Lieutenant Reeves flew too straight for too long, allowing a Kreth fighter to line up a clean shot. Plasma tore through his right engine. Reeves managed to limp back to the Valiant, but his Apache would be out of action for days. Sarah bit her lip. She would have rolled left and dropped altitude relative to the ecliptic. The Kreth fighters had a blind spot in their lower rear quadrant. Any pilot who studied their biology and ship design would know that. The battle finally ended when Admiral Cortez arrived with reinforcements. The Kreth withdrew, leaving behind 4 destroyed fighters and 1 damaged cruiser. The human fleet had lost 1 destroyer and suffered damage to 3 other vessels. 21 personnel were dead, 47 wounded. The civilian transports escaped safely. In the aftermath, exhaustion settled over the logistics center like a heavy blanket. Sarah had been on duty for 14 hours straight. Her eyes burned from staring at displays. Her back ached from sitting in the same position. But her mind remained sharp, focused on the problem she'd been working on for months. She returned to her quarters, a small cabin she shared with another junior officer who was currently on duty. Sarah locked the door and pulled out her personal data pad. On the screen was a program she'd been developing in secret, using her limited free time and considerable technical knowledge. The military called it a targeting patch, though that term didn't quite capture what Sarah had created. Every Apache used sophisticated computer systems to assist with targeting and navigation. The human brain, even enhanced with neural interfaces, couldn't process combat data fast enough for modern space warfare. The computers helped, calculating trajectories and predicting enemy movements. But the current system had limitations. Sarah had noticed them while studying combat footage and analyzing tactical data. The targeting computers used standard algorithms developed decades ago, before humanity encountered the Kreth. Those algorithms didn't account for the specific flight characteristics of organic alien ships. They treated Kreth fighters like human vessels with different performance parameters, which meant they missed subtle patterns in Kreth behavior. Sarah's patch did something different. She had studied hundreds of hours of combat footage, breaking down every Kreth fighter movement, every attack pattern, every evasive maneuver. She fed that data into machine learning algorithms, teaching the computer to recognize patterns that human programmers had missed. Her patch could predict Kreth movements with significantly higher accuracy than the standard targeting system. The problem was proving it worked. She'd run thousands of simulations on her personal data pad, and the results looked promising. In her tests, the patch improved targeting accuracy by 37% and reduced ammunition expenditure by 22%. But simulations weren't real combat, and she had no way to test the patch on an actual Apache without authorization she would never receive. Sarah had one option left. It was risky, possibly career-ending, but she was running out of choices. She needed to demonstrate her patch's effectiveness in a way that nobody could ignore. She opened a secure communication channel to an old friend from the academy. Marcus Webb was now a sergeant in the maintenance division, responsible for routine software updates on the Apache squadron. They'd stayed in touch over the years, and Sarah trusted him. The communication connected. Marcus's face appeared on the screen, showing a young man with dark skin and a perpetually amused expression. "Sarah, it's late. This better be important. I need a favor, Marcus. A big one." His amusement faded. "How big?" "I need you to install a software patch on one of the Apaches without going through official channels." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That's against about 15 different regulations. I could lose my position, possibly face court-martial." "I know what I'm asking. The patch is a targeting upgrade I've developed. It significantly improves accuracy against Kreth fighters. I've run thousands of simulations, but I need real combat data to prove it works. Why not submit it through proper channels?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I've tried. The colonel won't even look at proposals from logistics personnel. As far as he's concerned, I'm good for counting supplies and nothing else." Marcus rubbed his face. "Even if I wanted to help, how would this prove anything? You're not a pilot. You won't be in the cockpit to test your patch." "I've thought about that. Install it on one Apache without telling the pilot. We'll compare combat performance data from that ship against the rest of the squadron. If my patch works, the difference will be obvious. And if it doesn't work? If it causes targeting glitches during combat? It won't, I've tested it too thoroughly. But if something goes wrong, the pilot can override to manual targeting. The patch has multiple safety protocols built in." Marcus stared at her through the screen. "You're really serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I'm a good pilot, Marcus. Better than half the people flying Apaches right now. But nobody will give me a chance because I don't fit their image. This patch is my way in. If it works, they'll have to acknowledge my value. And if they trace the unauthorized software back to me, they won't. I've masked the installation signature. It'll look like a routine update from the central maintenance system. Even if they somehow figure it out, I'll take full responsibility. I'll tell them I blackmailed you or hacked your credentials." Marcus sighed deeply. "You always were stubborn. Fine, I'll do it. But this is the last time I risk my career for you." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Thank you, Marcus. I won't forget this. Which Apache should I install it on?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Apache 7, Lieutenant Morrison flies that one. He's a solid pilot, experienced but not the absolute best. If the patch improves his performance noticeably, that'll be the clearest demonstration. It'll be done during the next maintenance cycle. Morrison will never know." They ended the communication. Sarah sat back, her heart pounding. She'd just crossed a line, violated regulations, potentially destroyed her career. But she'd also taken control of her own future. The next time the Apaches flew into combat, her patch would fly with them. And when the data came back, when the performance improvements became obvious, they would have to listen to her. Even Colonel Vance would have to acknowledge what she'd accomplished. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Then she lay down and tried to sleep, knowing tomorrow would bring either vindication or ruin. 3 days passed before the Kreth returned. Sarah spent those days in a state of constant anxiety, waiting for security to burst through her door, waiting for Marcus to report that her patch had been discovered, but nothing happened. The maintenance logs showed routine updates completed successfully. Apache 7 underwent its standard diagnostic checks and passed every test. Lieutenant Morrison reported no anomalies during his practice flights. The patch ran silently in the background, learning and adapting, waiting for actual combat to demonstrate its capabilities. The alert came during the night cycle. Sarah jolted awake at the sound of battle stations, her heart immediately racing. She dressed quickly and rushed to the logistics center. Commander Willis was already there, looking grim as tactical data filled the displays. "They brought more ships this time," Willis said as Sarah took her station. 5 cruisers, at least 40 fighters. They want this system badly. Sarah pulled up fleet dispositions. The human forces were spread thin, protecting multiple locations. The Valiant and 2 escort frigates would face the initial assault alone until reinforcements could arrive. Colonel Vance's voice came through the communication system. "All Apache pilots to your birds. Launch in 5 minutes. This is going to be rough." Sarah watched the hangar bay cameras as pilots sprinted to their spacecraft. She spotted Morrison climbing into Apache 7, unaware that his targeting computer now carried unauthorized modifications. Her stomach twisted. If her patch failed, if it caused Morrison to miss critical shots or misidentify targets, people could die. The responsibility suddenly felt overwhelming, but it was too late to back out now. The Apaches launched in sequence, their engines flaring bright blue as they accelerated away from the Valiant. Within minutes, they engaged the incoming Kreth fighters. Sarah monitored multiple data streams simultaneously: ammunition expenditure, fuel consumption, damage assessments, and targeting accuracy statistics. The standard metrics she always tracked, but now she paid special attention to Apache 7. The first engagement lasted 30 seconds. Morrison fired a missile salvo at a Kreth fighter, executing an attack run on one of the frigates. The missiles tracked perfectly, compensating for the fighter's evasive maneuvers. The Kreth ship exploded in a burst of organic matter and energy. 1 kill, clean and efficient. Sarah noted the targeting solution time was 3 seconds faster than Morrison's usual performance. The battle intensified. Kreth fighters swarmed the human ships, their plasma weapons hammering at shields and armor. The Apaches weaved through the chaos, firing missiles and railgun rounds, trying to break up the alien attack patterns. 2 human pilots took damage. 1 ejected safely. The other managed to return to the Valiant with half their systems offline. Apache 7 continued to perform extraordinarily well. Morrison scored 3 more kills in rapid succession, his accuracy far exceeding his normal statistics. Sarah watched the data with growing excitement. The patch was working exactly as designed. Then Commander Willis noticed. He leaned over Sarah's shoulder, studying her displays. "Chen, what's going on with Apache 7? Morrison's performance is significantly better than his baseline." Sarah's mouth went dry. She'd hoped the improvement would be obvious, but not so dramatic that it raised immediate questions. "Perhaps Lieutenant Morrison is having an exceptional day, sir. His targeting solution times are 40% faster. His ammunition efficiency is up 35%. That's not having a good day, that's operating at a completely different level." Willis straightened up, his eyes narrowing. "Pull up the maintenance logs for Apache 7. I want to know if anything changed with that bird." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she accessed the maintenance database. She pulled up the logs, knowing what Willis would find if he looked carefully enough. The routine update from 3 days ago, the one Marcus had used to install her patch. Before Willis could examine the data closely, the tactical situation deteriorated. A Kreth cruiser broke through the frigate screen and launched a full missile barrage at the Valiant. Point defense systems engaged, destroying most of the incoming missiles, but 3 got through. The ship shuddered as explosions blossomed along the hull. "Damage to sections 12 through 15, someone reported. "We've lost 2 point defense batteries and one of the main railgun turrets." Willis forgot about Apache 7 and focused on the immediate crisis. "Redirect power from non-essential systems to shields. Get repair crews to those sections immediately. The battle continued for another hour. The Apaches fought desperately to keep the Kreth fighters away from the damaged Valiant. Morrison and Apache 7 remained at the center of the action, his enhanced targeting allowing him to destroy enemy fighters with brutal efficiency. Finally, human reinforcements arrived. The carrier UES Defiant jumped into the system with a full fighter wing and 2 destroyers. The Kreth, facing now unfavorable odds, withdrew. They left behind 16 destroyed fighters and 1 heavily damaged cruiser that the human ships finished off with concentrated railgun fire. The cost had been high. The Valiant suffered significant damage. 8 crew members were dead, 23 wounded. 1 Apache was completely destroyed, 2 others heavily damaged, but they'd held the line. The mining colony remained secure. In the aftermath, Sarah sat at her station exhausted and terrified. The combat data was conclusive. Apache 7, running her patch, had achieved twice the kill ratio of any other Apache in the squadron while using significantly less ammunition. Morrison himself was probably confused, wondering why he'd suddenly performed so far above his normal capability. Willis would investigate. He was thorough and smart, exactly the kind of officer who would dig until he found answers. When he discovered the unauthorized software modification, the trail would lead back to Marcus, and from Marcus to Sarah. Her career was over. Possibly her freedom as well, depending on how seriously the military took her violation of regulations. But as she stared at the combat data, Sarah couldn't bring herself to regret what she'd done. Her patch worked. It had saved lives today. Morrison had shot down 7 Kreth fighters, probably preventing them from destroying more human ships, killing more crew members. She'd proven her point, demonstrated her value. Now she would face the consequences. Sarah was preparing her confession, drafting the statement in her mind, when Colonel Vance's voice came through her communication device. "Lieutenant Chen, report to my office immediately." Her heart sank. Here it comes, she thought. She stood, straightened her uniform, and walked out of the logistics center. The corridors of the Valiant were busy with repair crews and medical personnel. The smell of burnt electronics and fire suppression foam lingered in the air. Sarah reached the colonel's office and pressed the door chime. His voice called for her to enter. She stepped inside and snapped to attention. Colonel Vance sat behind his desk, looking even more tired than usual. The battle had aged him, adding new lines to his already weathered face. Standing beside him was Lieutenant Morrison, still in his flight suit, and Commander Willis. This was definitely it. The 3 of them together meant they'd figured everything out. Sarah prepared herself for the reprimand, possibly arrest, but Colonel Vance's first words surprised her. "Lieutenant Chen, Commander Willis tells me you were monitoring combat performance data during the engagement." "Yes, sir. Standard logistics protocol." "Did you notice anything unusual about Apache 7's performance?" Sarah hesitated. She could lie, but they clearly already suspected something. Better to control the narrative. "Yes, sir. Apache 7 demonstrated significantly improved targeting accuracy and ammunition efficiency." Morrison spoke up. "I noticed it too, sir. During the fight, everything just clicked. The targeting solutions came faster, felt more accurate. I thought maybe adrenaline was making me sharper, but the combat recorder confirms the performance improvement." Willis crossed his arms. "We ran diagnostics on Apache 7 after the battle. The targeting computer has been modified. There's an additional software module running alongside the standard system. It's sophisticated, well-designed, and completely unauthorized." The colonel's eyes locked onto Sarah. "Do you know anything about this modification, Lieutenant?" This was the moment. Sarah could deny everything. Throw Marcus to the wolves, hope they couldn't prove her involvement. Or she could stand up, accept responsibility, and defend what she'd done. She chose honesty. "Yes, sir. I designed and installed that software patch." The office fell silent. Morrison's eyes widened. Willis looked angry but unsurprised, as if he'd already suspected. Colonel Vance's expression remained unreadable. "You installed unauthorized software on a military combat spacecraft," the colonel said slowly. "Do you understand the severity of that violation?" "Yes, sir. I take full responsibility for my actions." "Why would you do something so reckless, so potentially dangerous?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Because I'm a pilot, sir. I know I don't look like what you think a pilot should be. I know you and the other officers have decided I'm better suited for logistics. But I've spent 5 years studying combat tactics, analyzing alien behaviors and developing skills that could save lives. This patch proves I have something valuable to offer beyond supply management. Colonel Vance stood slowly. He walked around his desk until he stood directly in front of Sarah. Colonel Vance studied Sarah for what felt like an eternity. The silence in the office pressed down on her like physical weight. She kept her posture rigid, her eyes forward, waiting for judgment. "Lieutenant Morrison," the colonel finally said, not taking his eyes off Sarah. "How did the modified targeting system feel during combat? Any glitches, any moments where you doubted its accuracy?" Morrison shifted his weight. "No, sir. Actually, the opposite. It felt like the computer was reading my mind, anticipating exactly what I needed. The targeting solutions were faster and more reliable than I've ever experienced. When I fired, I knew I was going to hit. That confidence let me take shots I might normally have hesitated on." "Commander Willis, what did the diagnostic analysis show about the patch's integration with existing systems?" Willis consulted his datapad. "The code is professionally written, sir. It interfaces cleanly with the standard targeting package without overriding safety protocols. The programmer clearly understood the Apache systems at a deep level. I've had my best technicians examine it for the last hour. They're actually impressed with the architecture." Colonel Vance turned back to Sarah. "How long did it take you to develop this software?" 6 months, sir. I worked on it during my off-duty hours using combat footage and tactical data from the archives. Who else was involved? Sarah had prepared for this question. I had assistants installing the patch, but that person acted under my instructions. They didn't understand what they were really doing. The design and implementation were entirely my responsibility. The colonel's jaw tightened. He clearly didn't believe her attempt to shield Marcus, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he walked back to his desk and pulled up something on his terminal. "Your personnel file makes interesting reading, Lieutenant. Top scores in flight school. Exceptional marks in tactical analysis. Multiple requests for transfer to combat pilot positions. Each request denied with varying justifications." He looked up. "I denied the last one personally." Sarah said nothing. What could she say? "Do you want to know why I rejected your transfer request?" the colonel asked. "I believe I understand the reason, sir." "I doubt that. The truth is your request came across my desk the same week we lost 4 Apache pilots in a single engagement. Good people. Experienced flyers dead because they couldn't adapt fast enough to Kreth tactics. I was angry, grieving, and when I saw another transfer request from someone who'd never seen real combat, I rejected it without thinking." He stood again, this time moving to look out the viewport at the stars beyond. "I've been in the military for 40 years, Lieutenant. I've seen humanity go from a single world to a scattered collection of colonies, fighting for survival against species that have traveled the stars for millennia. I've watched young people die because we're still learning how to fight these wars. It makes you conservative, cautious about who you put in a cockpit." The colonel turned back to face her. "But you've put me in an impossible position. You violated regulations, installed unauthorized software on a combat spacecraft, potentially endangering a pilot's life. Those are court-martial offenses. I should have you arrested right now." Sarah's throat tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "However," Vance continued, "your patch performed flawlessly during combat. Lieutenant Morrison achieved the highest single-engagement kill count of any Apache pilot in this squadron's history. Your unauthorized software modification probably saved human lives today." He paused. "Commander Willis, what's your assessment of extending this patch to the entire Apache squadron?" Willis looked startled by the question. "Sir, are you seriously considering legitimizing an unauthorized modification?" "I'm considering whether a tool that improves our combat effectiveness by this margin should be ignored because it was developed through irregular channels. War doesn't care about regulations, Commander. War cares about results." Willis frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. From a technical standpoint, the patch could be installed fleet-wide. But we'd need to run extensive testing first, verify it works across different combat scenarios. How long would proper testing take? Minimum 3 weeks, probably closer to 6 for full validation. "We don't have 6 weeks, Morrison interjected. "Intelligence reports suggest the Kreth are massing forces for a major offensive. If this patch gives us an advantage, we need it operational as soon as possible." Colonel Vance nodded slowly. He turned his attention back to Sarah. "Lieutenant Chen, I'm going to make you an offer. It's probably the only offer you're going to get, so I suggest you consider it carefully. Sarah's pulse quickened. Yes, sir. I can court-martial you for what you've done. The charges would stick, and you'd spend the next few years in a military prison. Your career would be over, your future ruined. That's option 1. He picked up a data pad from his desk. Option 2. You agree to work with our technical team to validate and improve your patch. You document everything. Teach our programmers how it works and help us integrate it across the fleet. In exchange, I'll overlook the unauthorized installation. No charges, no court-martial. However, you'll remain in logistics. This doesn't earn you a cockpit. Sarah felt her hope deflate. She'd proven herself, demonstrated capabilities beyond logistics coordination, and the colonel was still refusing to let her fly. The injustice of it burned in her chest. But before she could respond, Morrison spoke up. Sir, with respect, that doesn't seem fair. Lieutenant Chen created something that could change how we fight the Kreth. She demonstrated tactical understanding beyond most of our combat pilots. Keeping her in logistics seems like a waste of talent. Lieutenant Morrison, your opinion is noted but not requested, Vance said sharply. Sir, I flew with that patch today. I know what it's capable of because I felt the difference in combat. Whoever designed it understands Kreth tactics better than anyone I've met. That person should be in a cockpit, not counting ammunition stores. Willis cleared his throat. Colonel, if I may, the lieutenant's performance data during combat operations shows she has an exceptional ability to analyze tactical situations in real time. She's made several recommendations over the past months that improved our operational efficiency. Morrison has a point about wasted talent. Colonel Vance's expression darkened. Are you both questioning my judgment? No, sir, Morrison said quickly. We're suggesting there might be a third option you haven't considered. The silence stretched out again. Sarah watched the colonel's face, seeing the internal struggle. He was a man who valued regulations and chain of command, but he was also a combat veteran who understood that winning wars sometimes required breaking rules. Finally, he spoke. Lieutenant Chen, answer me honestly. Why do you want to fly the Apache so badly? Is it about glory, about proving something to yourself? Sarah considered the question carefully. Sir, it's about being where I can do the most good. I'm a skilled pilot and a tactical thinker. Logistics is important work. But every day I spend coordinating supplies is a day I'm not in combat making split-second decisions that save lives. Today proved that my understanding of enemy tactics can make a real difference. I want to be in a position where I can use those skills directly. Vance studied her for another long moment. Then he did something Sarah hadn't expected. He smiled just slightly. You know what you remind me of, Lieutenant? You remind me of myself 40 years ago. Stubborn, talented, convinced that the brass was too stupid to recognize your potential. He shook his head. I was right, as it turned out. The brass was wrong about me. Maybe I'm wrong about you. He tapped something on his datapad. Here's option 3. You work with our technical team to validate your patch. You train our pilots on how to maximize its effectiveness. And you complete the full Apache combat certification program under my personal supervision. If you can meet the same standards I hold every other pilot to, genuinely earn your place in a cockpit, then I'll assign you to the squadron. Sarah's heart leaped. Sir, I accept. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The certification program is brutal, and I'm going to hold you to a higher standard than anyone else precisely because of how you got here. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. You'll fly training missions during your duty shifts and study tactics during your off hours. One mistake, one failure, and you're back in logistics permanently. Understood? Understood, sir. I won't disappoint you. You'd better not. Dismissed. Sarah saluted and turned to leave. As she reached the door, the colonel called out one more time. Lieutenant Chen, one more thing. She turned back. Sir, that was good work today. Your patch saved lives. Whatever else happens, remember that. Sarah left the office feeling like she was floating. Morrison caught up with her in the corridor. You've got guts, Chen, I'll give you that. Vance is going to put you through hell during certification. I know. I'm ready for it, Morrison grinned. I believe you. Listen, when you do get certified, I want you on my wing. Anyone who can design software like that will be one hell of a pilot. I'd be honored, Lieutenant. He walked away, leaving Sarah alone in the corridor. She leaned against the wall, letting the reality of what just happened sink in. She had a chance. A real legitimate chance to become an Apache pilot. The path ahead would be difficult. The next 4 weeks tested every limit Sarah thought she had, then pushed her beyond them. Colonel Vance hadn't been exaggerating when he warned her about the certification program's difficulty. He seemed determined to prove that his decision to give her a chance wasn't favoritism or weakness. Her days started at 0500 hours with physical conditioning. Despite the advanced technology of space combat, pilots still needed exceptional physical fitness. The G-forces during atmospheric combat maneuvers could crush an unprepared body. Sarah ran obstacle courses, practiced high-G resistance training in the centrifuge, and completed endurance exercises that left her gasping and trembling. The other Apache pilots watched her training with mixed reactions. Some, like Morrison, offered encouragement and advice. Others remained skeptical, waiting for her to fail. A few were openly hostile, seeing her presence as a political statement rather than earned opportunity. Lieutenant Graves was the worst. He was a tall, muscular pilot with 15 confirmed kills and an ego to match. During a briefing session, he made his opinions clear. So we're supposed to believe that someone who's been pushing papers for 5 years can suddenly become a combat pilot? This is affirmative action nonsense. And it's going to get people killed. Sarah had learned to ignore such comments, but Morrison hadn't. Graves, that paper pusher designed the targeting system that's improved your kill ratio by 30%. Maybe show some respect. A computer program doesn't make her a pilot. Combat does, and she's never been in real combat. Colonel Vance, who'd been listening silently, finally spoke. You're right, Graves. Chen hasn't been in combat as a pilot. Neither had you before your first mission. Neither had I before mine. Everyone starts somewhere. She'll prove herself like everyone else, or she'll wash out. Until then, focus on your own performance and let me worry about certification standards. Graves fell silent, but his resentment remained obvious. Sarah knew she'd have to prove herself not just to the colonel, but to the entire squadron. The technical training was intense but manageable. Sarah already understood Apache systems better than most pilots. She could strip and rebuild the targeting computer blindfolded, explain every system redundancy, and recite emergency procedures from memory. That knowledge came from months of obsessive study, and it showed. Flight training was different. Knowing how a system worked and actually flying it were entirely separate skills. Sarah's first time in an Apache cockpit was overwhelming. The neural interface connected directly to her brain, feeding her data faster than conscious thought could process. Engine status, weapon systems, threat warnings, navigation data, all flowing directly into her mind. She lasted 12 minutes before the sensory overload forced her to disconnect. She vomited into a bag, her hands shaking from the neural feedback. Commander Riley, the flight instructor, watched without sympathy. That's normal for first-timers. The interface takes getting used to. Some people never adapt. We'll try again tomorrow. Sarah returned the next day determined to do better. This time she lasted 20 minutes before the overload hit. The third day she managed 40 minutes. By the end of the first week she could maintain connection for 2 hours without discomfort. The simulator training started simple. Basic maneuvers, standard flight patterns, emergency procedures. Sarah excelled at these, her theoretical knowledge translating smoothly into practical skill. But simulation wasn't combat, and everyone knew it. Colonel Vance made sure her training included realistic combat scenarios. He programmed the simulator with situations pulled directly from actual battles, including footage of engagements where human pilots had died. Sarah found herself facing overwhelming odds, equipment failures, and tactical situations with no good solutions. She failed more than she succeeded. In one simulation, she got too aggressive pursuing a Kreth fighter and flew into a plasma barrage that would have killed her instantly. In another, she hesitated on a critical shot and watched her simulated wingman die. Each failure stung, but each one taught her something valuable. Commander Riley noted her progress in his daily reports. Chen is adapting faster than anticipated. Her tactical instincts are excellent, though she tends to overthink in high-pressure situations. She needs more confidence in her instincts and less reliance on calculated solutions. 3 weeks into training, Sarah flew her first real Apache mission. Not combat, just a routine patrol of the system's outer boundaries. Colonel Vance assigned Morrison as her wingman, both to provide support and to evaluate her performance. The moment Sarah launched from the Valiant and felt the Apache respond to her commands in actual space rather than simulation, something clicked. This was what she'd been working toward for 5 years. The spacecraft moved like an extension of her body, responding to thought as much as control input. The stars wheeled around her as she executed a series of test maneuvers, feeling the engine's power, the responsiveness of the control systems. Not bad. Chen, Morrison said over the communications channel. Your form is solid. Let's run through some combat drills. They spent 4 hours practicing attack runs, evasive maneuvers, and formation flying. Sarah made mistakes, overcorrected on a roll, came in too steep on a simulated bombing run. But she also demonstrated the tactical awareness that had impressed everyone who'd studied her work. When a sensor ghost appeared on their displays, possibly a Kreth scout drone, Sarah immediately identified the optimal response. Morrison, if that's real, it'll try to run toward the outer system to jump away. We should split formation, you high, me low, box it in before it can accelerate. Good thinking. Colonel Vance, are you seeing this? The colonel's voice came through from the Valiant. I'm seeing it. Chen, execute your plan. They split formation and moved to intercept the sensor contact. It turned out to be a piece of debris, not a threat. But Sarah's tactical response had been textbook perfect. The patrol ended without incident, but Sarah felt she'd crossed an important threshold. She was no longer just a logistics officer playing at being a pilot. She was becoming the real thing. Colonel Vance summoned her to his office after she'd debriefed and cleaned up. She entered with a mixture of anxiety and hope, unsure what evaluation she was about to receive. The colonel gestured for her to sit. Your patrol performance was acceptable, Lieutenant. Commander Riley and Lieutenant Morrison both filed positive reports. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Acceptable isn't certified. You still have significant ground to cover. He pulled up a holographic display showing her simulation scores and training metrics. Your technical flying is excellent, among the best I've seen. Your tactical awareness is exceptional, but you're holding back, second-guessing yourself in critical moments. In combat, that hesitation will get you killed. I understand, sir. I'm working on it. I know you are, but I need you to understand something, Chen. Being a good pilot isn't enough. Being a great pilot isn't enough. You need to be exceptional because people are watching you differently than they watch others. Graves isn't wrong that some people see your presence here as political. Every mistake you make will be amplified, used as evidence that women shouldn't fly Apaches, that I made the wrong choice giving you this chance. Sarah felt a flash of anger. That's not fair, sir. No, it isn't, but fair doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand the reality. You're not just proving yourself. You're proving something for everyone who'll come after you. That's a heavy burden, but it's the one you're carrying whether you like it or not. The weight of his words settled over her. She'd been focused on her own goals, her own desire to fly. But the colonel was right. Her success or failure would impact future opportunities for others. I won't fail, sir. See that you don't. You've got 2 more weeks of training before final certification. There's a live fire exercise scheduled, where you'll engage actual drone targets in combat conditions. Pass that and you're in. Fail, and you're back in logistics. I'll pass, sir. Vance nodded. Dismissed. Sarah left the office and headed to her quarters. 2 weeks until certification. 2 weeks to prove she belonged in an Apache cockpit. She pulled up the training schedule on her data pad, studying the exercises planned for the coming days. Her door chimed. She opened it to find Morrison standing there with 2 other Apache pilots, Lieutenants Jackson and Reeves. We thought you might want some company, Morrison said. Maybe some advice from people who've been where you are. Sarah stepped back to let them enter. The 3 pilots crowded into her small quarters, making the space feel even more cramped. Jackson, a woman with close-cropped black hair and a friendly smile, spoke first. I heard Vance gave you the speech about representing everyone. He gave me a similar talk when I certified 3 years ago. Only female Apache pilot in the fleet at the time. There are others now? Sarah asked. 2 more besides me. Both excellent pilots. But we're still a tiny minority, and that means every flight we make is being judged by different standards. Jackson shrugged. It gets easier once you prove yourself, but that first period is brutal. Reeves, a quiet man with sharp eyes, added, the live fire exercise is the real test. Drones are faster and more aggressive than anything you've faced in simulation. Colonel Vance programs them personally, and he doesn't believe in easy tests. The day of the live fire certification exercise arrived with the inevitability of a storm. Sarah woke before her alarm, her stomach tight with nervous energy. She'd spent the last 2 weeks training harder than she'd ever trained in her life. Morrison, Jackson, and Reeves had pushed her through scenario after scenario, sharing hard-won tactical knowledge and forcing her to react faster, think clearer, trust her instincts. Now came the moment of truth. The briefing room was packed with Apache pilots, maintenance crew, and senior officers. Everyone wanted to watch the logistics officer either succeed or fail spectacularly. Sarah felt the weight of their attention as she entered and took her seat. Colonel Vance stood at the front of the room, his expression unreadable. Today's exercise is simple in concept, challenging in execution. Lieutenant Chen will face 15 combat drones programmed with Kreth fighter tactics and performance characteristics. The drones are armed with non-lethal marking lasers, but they're every bit as fast and maneuverable as real enemy fighters. A successful hit from a drone counts as a kill against the pilot. He brought up a holographic display showing the exercise area, a section of space near the system's asteroid belt. The engagement zone covers 10,000 cubic kilometers. Lieutenant Chen will start from a disadvantaged position, with drones already distributed throughout the area. Her objective is to destroy all 15 drones while sustaining no more than 2 hits. 3 hits means failure. Any questions? Sarah raised her hand. What are the ammunition limits, sir? You'll carry a standard combat load. 72 missiles, 500 railgun rounds. Use them wisely. Running dry counts as an automatic failure. Vance paused. Any other questions? No? Then get to your bird, Lieutenant. Launch in 30 minutes. The briefing ended. Sarah headed to the hangar bay, her mind already running through tactical approaches. 15 targets, limited ammunition, starting from a bad position. The scenario was designed to test everything simultaneously: combat skills, resource management, tactical thinking, and ability to handle pressure. In the hangar, she found her Apache prepped and ready. The ground crew had marked it with temporary designation Alpha 10. Sarah ran through her pre-flight checks with obsessive care, verifying every system, every weapon, every backup protocol. This was not the time for oversights. Marcus appeared beside her as she completed the external inspection. Sarah, I wanted to wish you luck. That patch of yours has saved a lot of lives over the past month. Now it's time for you to prove you can use it yourself. Thanks, Marcus, and thank you for taking the risk back then. I know it could have ended badly for you. He smiled. Worth it to see you here. Now go show them what humanity's really capable of. Sarah climbed into the cockpit and initiated the neural interface connection. The familiar rush of data flooded her consciousness, but she'd learned to process it smoothly. The Apache systems came online one by one, each greeting her like an old friend. Weapons armed, engines ready, targeting computer running her own patch alongside the standard systems. Apache Alpha 10, you are cleared for launch, the control tower announced. Sarah throttled up and felt the Apache lift off the hangar deck. The launch tube opened ahead of her, stars visible beyond. She accelerated smoothly through the tube and burst into open space, the Valiant falling away behind her. The communication channel crackled. Colonel Vance's voice came through. Lieutenant Chen, proceed to the exercise area. Drones will activate when you cross the boundary. Good luck. Thank you, sir. Beginning approach now. Sarah pushed the Apache toward the designated coordinates, her sensors already searching for threats. The asteroid field loomed ahead, massive rocks tumbling slowly through space. Perfect territory for ambush, lots of cover for the drones to hide behind. She crossed the boundary marker. Immediately, her threat warning system screamed. Multiple targeting locks from different directions. The drones had been waiting, positioned to catch her in a crossfire. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. She rolled hard left and down relative to the ecliptic, diving toward a cluster of asteroids while deploying countermeasures. Marking lasers flashed through the space she'd just occupied. The drones were fast, just as advertised. Her tactical display showed approximate positions for 8 of the 15 drones. The others were still hidden, waiting for opportunities. Sarah dove between 2 asteroids using their mass to break the targeting locks. She needed to even the odds quickly, take down the exposed drones before the hidden ones could coordinate an effective attack. She identified the nearest drone, locked missiles, and fired a 2-shot spread. The missiles streaked away, their engines burning bright. The drone tried to evade, but Sarah had predicted its movement. Her patch calculated the optimal intercept angle, and both missiles connected. The drone exploded in a shower of debris marked by bright orange paint to simulate destruction. 1 down, 14 to go. 2 more drones emerged from behind an asteroid, moving to flank her position. Sarah didn't panic. She'd trained for exactly this scenario with Morrison and the others. She accelerated hard toward one of the drones, closing the distance faster than it expected. At point-blank range, she opened up with railgun fire. The hypersonic slugs tore through the drone's armor. Sensors registered the kill. The second flanking drone fired, but Sarah had already rolled away. She looped around an asteroid using its gravity to assist her turn and came up on the drone's tail. Another missile, another kill, 3 down. Sarah checked her ammunition. 68 missiles remaining. 470 railgun rounds. Good conservation so far. Her threat warning flared again. 4 drones converged on her position from different vectors, executing a coordinated attack pattern. This was the real test. The drones were learning, adapting, working together just like real Kreth fighters would. Sarah's mind raced through options. She couldn't take all 4 simultaneously. She needed to break their formation, force them into individual engagements. She spotted a large asteroid with a narrow gap running through its center, barely wide enough for an Apache. She dove toward the gap at full acceleration. The drones followed, maintaining their formation. Sarah threaded through the narrow passage, rock walls screaming past on both sides with meters to spare. Behind her, the drones tried to follow. 2 made it through. 2 didn't, unable to maneuver tightly enough, and crashed into the asteroid walls in bursts of orange marker paint. 5 down, 10 remaining. Sarah emerged from the far side of the asteroid and immediately reversed course, flipping the Apache around while maintaining forward momentum. The pursuing drones hadn't expected that maneuver. She fired missiles at both targets before they could react. Both kills, 7 down, 8 to go. But Sarah was breathing hard now, her body straining against the G-forces from the aggressive maneuvering. Sweat ran down her face inside the helmet. The neural interface demanded constant attention, feeding her data about threats and opportunities. She couldn't let up for a second. The remaining 8 drones changed tactics. Instead of attacking directly, they spread out, harassing her from long range with laser fire. They were trying to wear her down, force mistakes through exhaustion. Sarah recognized the strategy because she'd designed parts of it into her patch. The Kreth used similar approaches when facing superior human firepower. Patience, harassment, waiting for the opponent to make an error. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Sarah plotted an attack pattern that would take her through the drone formation like a blade. She accelerated hard, diving through the dispersed enemies while firing railgun bursts at anything that came into optimal range. 2 drones took fatal hits. 1 managed to graze her with its marking laser, painting a yellow streak across her hull. 1 hit registered. She could afford 1 more before failing the test. Sarah didn't slow down. She executed a complex series of rolls and dives, weaving through the asteroid field while hunting the remaining 6 drones. Her ammunition stores dwindled. 50 missiles left, 300 railgun rounds. She caught another drone exposed and fired a missile. Kill number 10. 5 targets remaining. But fatigue was setting in now. The constant high G maneuvers were taking their toll. Sarah's muscles ached, her vision occasionally blurred from the neural interface strain. She'd been fighting for 40 minutes without rest, pushing herself and the Apache to their limits. The 5 remaining drones sensed her weakening state. They pressed their attack, coming in from multiple angles simultaneously. Sarah dodged and weaved, returning fire when opportunities presented themselves. She scored another kill, then another, but took a second hit in the process. 2 hits total, no margin for error remaining. 3 drones left, and Sarah was running low on ammunition. 32 missiles, 150 railgun rounds. She needed to finish this quickly before exhaustion or ammunition depletion forced a failure. The drones tried to surround her. Sarah didn't let them. She focused on the nearest target with an intensity that bordered on tunnel vision, pursuing it through the asteroid field with relentless determination. The drone executed every evasive maneuver in its programming, but Sarah stayed locked on. Her patch predicted every movement, every dodge. She fired her last railgun rounds in a sustained burst that finally destroyed the target. 11 kills total.